Hi, welcome to another CS0 Intro to Java Programming video. This video I'm going to wrap up all the stuff we've been talking about in the previous videos and add one more thing to it, and that's using images. I'm going to draw an image to the graphics context. In the previous video, I showed you how to use the graphics context and draw strings to it. Now we're going to draw an image underneath strings that we draw to the graphics context. In order to do so, we have to understand how to work with images. That's going to involve looking at Java's ImageIO and then talking about things called paths. So without further ado, let's get into it. The class that you should be looking at here is called public class text over images extends JFrame implements action listener. When we run it, this is what we get. Draw, and an image shows up, and text shows up over the image. All right? Let's take a look at the code. So we know that it's JFrame. We know and learned from last video that it's going to implement action listener. And along with action listener, we know that we have to import action listener, action event. We know that when we use any J components, we're importing swing. We know when we do any drawing, we're going to import AWT. Some of the other imports you're going to find here are ImageIO, and that's going to be to read the image into our file, IO file, and IO exception. We're going to talk about those things when I start talking about the ImageIO stuff. All right, let's take a look at the old stuff and then how we're going to add the new stuff into it. So we looked at the header. We've got a draw panel, which is a J panel, and a button. We saw that in the previous video. I'm not going to go over that again. We've got our main method, and main method does all the stuff the main method has always done. It's going to instantiate itself into the main. It's going to set the size of the frame. It's going to create our GUI, and we've got our create GUI method. It's going to set visible, and then it's going to do something new, load images. Load images is a method that's from that text over images class because it's being called to the frame object of that type. So we're going to look in the text over images class for this method. So when this gets called, I'm going to scroll down and up. There we go. There's my load images method. I'll come back to this in a bit. Just wanted to show you that this is a method that we wrote in our text over images class. So the main method does all the same things as usual. Let's really quickly take a look at the create GUI. It's not going to do anything new. Set default close operation, exit on close. We're going to get our content pane, put it into our window variable of the container class. We're going to set the layout on that content pane object and set its flow. We're going to create our J panel and set its dimensions. In this case, the dimensions are 400 by 400. We are going to set the background color to white. We're going to create our button, put draw on it, then we're going to add our components. Right? We've done that numerous times now. Hopefully, this stuff is becoming more and more familiar and you're getting a little bit more fluent with it. Now we're going to register the button to the listener because, as you may recall, we have an action listener implemented to the class. That means we have to find some component that we want to be interactive and we register it to the listener so that when we press that button, the listener class, which is this one, is going to hear it and it's going to invoke action performed. We'll look at action performed in just a little bit. All right, so that would terminate our create GUI method. We would set visible true, and then we'll go down to load image. This is the first new thing that I want to talk about, load image. This method I wrote. This is not part of any methods in or any classes in any of the Java libraries. It's one that I just came up with the name. I wrote it, and I wrote it so that I could just put all of my image loading stuff in a separate module. In this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish a path that the program is going to follow in order to find the image. I'm going to create a file using that path, and then I'm going to try to load in the image or read in the image into the image variable. If I can't, I'm going to catch an exception that comes off of it. I'll talk about all that stuff in great detail. Let's go up to the top to our declarations, to our instance variables. You'll notice the instance variables. I have my J panel, my J button, and I have an image. So this is called class image. and the variable is called image. You notice that when I wanted to use image, I have to, well, it's imported in AWT, so I didn't have to explicitly import it. So the image variable is declared right here, and we are going to use it in a couple of different places. We're going to use it here where we load it, then we're going to use it down here where we draw it to the graphics context. Right, let's look at the ImageIO here. Here are the steps. The first step is creating a path. A path is like a series of breadcrumbs that the program is going to follow that lead us to the resource that we're looking for. In this case, we're looking for a resource that is an image. So we have to establish a path. Now let's open up the project browser here to see where that image actually is. If we look at this path, it says images/sci.jpg. I have a folder here called images, and in it there's a JPEG called sci. Okay, that's the image that I'm going to use in my JFrame. Here's the way Java is going to work. We are going to use that path to read the image, and Java is going to start looking for that image in what's called the root node. The root node, or the root directory for this project, is week 1. That's the outermost directory, containing directory for our project. So if I go out to my desktop and I look for my folder, so it's in, what is it in? Dropbox 1130, so I'll go to Dropbox 1130. I'm going to go to lecture files, and then I'm going to go to week 1, and then I'm going to go, hey, there's images. So week 1 is my project folder. If I click on that, there's an images folder, and then I find my sci image in there. So I would say that week 1 is my root node. In IntelliJ, the way it defaults is that the project folder is the root node. So when I say that a path IntelliJ starts looking for the resource in the root node, it means that the program is going to draw its attention to this directory, and it's going to immediately look in here for its resource. Now, if you want to put your image someplace else, you have to make sure in your path you indicate that it's going someplace else. So right here, the image that I'm looking for is sci.jpg. I put this slash here and the images before it. Images is going to be a directory that it's going to look for in the root node. So if root node is week 1, it's going to look in images. So it will essentially, Java is going to open up this folder, and this little slash here is essentially opening up the folder, and it's going to look for this file in there, sci. Well, let's just say I made a subdirectory in images. I did something like this, new directory, paintings. And then I moved sci into that. If I run it now, Java's not going to find sci. Watch, I'll run this. And I've got a problem. See, the image didn't show up here, and then down in my console, all this red text showed up. This is called an exception and error message. So when Java can't do something, when it's got a problem, what happens oftentimes is it does this thing called it throws an exception. In this case, it threw this, this ImageIO exception, and it tells me I can't find the image. Well, Java is looking in the root node, and it's looking in a directory called images, which I have here, and it's looking for the image right inside of there. Well, there's no image inside the image folder. If I come out here, I look at images, there's no image in here. Oh, but there is a directory called paintings that has an image in it. So if I want Java to find this image now, I would have to go /paintings/sci. Now I'm directing Java to the painting that is in paintings, that is in images. I assume that I spelled that correctly. We'll see if I didn't spell it correctly. You may have noticed that I'm prone to typos. Hey, it found it. I spelled everything correctly. Now here's the thing about paths. If you have any typos in here, it's not going to follow the path. It's going to, it's going to be broken. Java is very literal. Computers are very literal. They'll do exactly what you tell them to do. So if I do something like this and go look for psi in paintings inside of images, it's not going to be able to find it because paintings doesn't exist. Paintings, on the other hand, does exist. So Java will follow that path and find the image. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. I create this string variable called path, and then I'm going to create a file here using that string as a name for that file. Now I've got this little thing here called try and catch. I'm not going to talk in depth about what this does. Essentially, Java is going to try doing this. If it can't do it, it's going to print out an error message, and it's going to allow the program to continue running. So it's going to try reading the file at this path and loading it into the image variable. So ImageIO is a class, read is a method from that class, and file is the expected parameter argument in that method. So what this is doing is it's just fetching the image at this path and storing it in this variable. Once we do that, the image will show up and we're good. Now here's the deal. Let's go back to the idea of methods. This is my method definition. One thing that students often do, as I said before, is students will define a method and then they'll forget to call the method. You'd be surprised by how many times I do this as well. I'll get into writing a program, and I'll write all my methods, and then I will come back later and start calling the methods, and I'll forget to call one, and then I'm going to get a problem. It'll say something null pointer exception or whatever, and then I've got a problem. We'll see what happens when I don't call load images. Run it, and boom, lots of errors. So I have this thing called Java null pointer exception. I'm not going to get into detail on what a null pointer exception is today. We'll get into that in depth when we start talking about objects. But just know that this happened because I tried using that image and painting it to the graphics context without actually loading it into the variable. So this method call loads the image into the variable so that I can then draw that image to the graphics context. All right, so we've gone through everything in the main. I loaded images. You saw that I first create my path, use that to create my file, use that file to retrieve my image and store it in the image variable. Excellent. We've got all of the works in place to do our drawing. Now, we're not really going to do much new here. We're going to, go down to action performed, and we're going to create our graphics context like we did in the last video. So G gets draw panel.get graphics. So it's going to look at the J panel, retrieve the graphics context from it so we can paint to it. Now we're going to create something called an image icon. And image icon it's basically like a little wrapper for an image. I'm going to call it ICO, and then I'm going to use that image and put it into that image icon. Then I'm going to use paint icon and paint it to the graphics context. So ICO.paint icon, this G 10 and 10. Don't worry about these arguments right now. I'll explain them really briefly. This just means this is our observer. It's going to be painting it to this JFrame, to this class called text over images. G is my graphics context. So that's specifically where it's going to paint the icon. And then it's going to paint it at 10 and 10. So this is going to be my origin coordinates for my image icon. If I put that at 100 and 100, it would paint the image with the left-hand corner, up red left-hand corner, at 100 and 100. So this is what renders the image to the graphics context. Set color. If I do g.setColor, everything below it that's drawn to the graphics context is going to be red. So if I drew some strings below it, those strings would be red. If I drew some text or some rectangles or some ovals below it, those things would be red as well. If I wanted to draw more things that are different colors, I would set color again. So I've got this one. If I run this, you'll see that it's going to say, oops, this was the bad one. Run it. You'll see that my text is red. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a set color and another draw string. So I'll just copy these two things here. I'll paste them below, and I'll set color blue, and then I'm going to draw another string at 305, and change the string. I'll run it. I'll press my button. And there we go. You see my second line of text is blue now. So anytime I want to change the color, I'll just make a new set color call and change the color in the parameter there. And then anything that I draw below it is going to be of that color until I change the color again. All right, so we've got all of the new skills that you're going to need to do to put together a frame project that draws an image and draws text over it. What I want you to do now is similar to what we've done before. We're going to go back and edit our basic GUI template. You are going to take the time to create your image, do the load image method, call the load image method in main, and then draw the icon to the graphics context. Why don't you pause the video, and when you come back, I'll have mine edited as well. Well, there you have it. Here's my basic GUI template with that awful pink text over my image. I rewrote all the stuff that I did in my text over images file into my basic GUI template. So I've put it all together. Your first project is going to be something similar to this. And now we've got all the skills in place to do that. Let's take a look at my code. Let's take a look at it all together. So first thing that I had to do was I had to declare my image, which I did, image. I had to define my load image method, where I create my string for a path, I create my file, I try to load my image. If I can't, then I print stack trace. This is the loading of the image into the project. Then I call that method. I've got to make sure I call it. Remember, if I don't call it, the program breaks because I try to use my image, this code never gets executed. There's no image object in the img file, and I try drawing it, and we get that null pointer exception. All right, let's take a look at other things here. So I didn't have to do anything new with my GUI. That was all good. I come down to action performed, and I create my image icon, load image into it. I paint the image icon, and then I set the color on my text. And that's everything. We've gone through several videos now that explain the basics, and in each one of those videos adds a new piece to the puzzle until we get a fully functioning program. You've learned a lot so far, and some of this stuff might be pretty confusing, and some of you might have gone over your heads. If you feel a little bit lost, you feel a little bit stuck, it's very important that you get practice typing this stuff out. Open up your textbook, read through the text, and as you're reading through the code examples in the text, type it out. It's really important that you trace through the code. In other words, read through the code line by line. And what you need to do is read through it until you understand it. If you see a line that you don't understand what it does, look it up in the videos, look it up in the text, and make a comment above it so that you know what it is and what it does. Other ways to learn from this is modify these things a little bit. Change some of the values, move things around, see what happens. Does it break? Does it work? Does it look better? Does it look worse? See what everything can do when you change these things around. You need to interact with this code. You need to live with this code. You need to breathe this code in to fully understand how things work. With these videos that you just watched, you're ready to go and do your first assignment. Good luck on that, and thanks for watching.